Hello, my Astro family. This is Lada from astrolada.com, and we're beginning the 2021 Astrology Marathon with 13 world famous astrologers, and my partners at astrolada.com are going to give us their advice and their recommendations and their insight into the crazy bombshell of a 2021 that is coming ahead. And we're starting with one of my favorite human beings and astrologers, Darren. Hello, Darren.
Hi, Lada. How are you?
Thank you for joining us. You were very busy the whole 2020 with Saturn and Jupiter in your sixth house. They really made you work hard at your other job.
Yeah.
We have not seen you for a while, so I'm very excited, and I'm so happy that you are kicking off that marathon. And Darren was going to do a summary of the whole 2021, and then with each other astrologers, we're going to look at each particular sign. So stay with us over the next 4 or 5 days to watch all of those on Lada Duncheva channel. So Darren, tell us what's up.
Yeah, it's been a whole year. Can you believe it?
No, we've missed you. You're beautiful.
Yes, I miss being here.
So yeah, you
Yeah,
prepared for us the whole 2021. What are the major events?
there's so much to talk about. Well, the big talk is the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction in Aquarius, which everybody is talking about. But there's also going to be a square to the planet Uranus, especially towards Saturn, because they're slower moving planets. So it's going to be a longer relationship between those two. And and just to get an idea of what the year will be like is to get an understanding of the dynamics of these planets. So with Saturn, the reason why Saturn-Jupiter conjunctions is such a big deal because it signifies revolutionary changes for society at large. And the thing about Saturn making contact with the outer planets, the slower moving planets like Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto, Saturn likes to solidify things. And so it makes the results of Saturn prolong and last long. So it's like putting pressure on coal that eventually turns into a diamond. So that's why Saturn-Jupiter conjunctions is a big deal. And ancient mundane astrologers used to keep up with these cycles of these two planets to keep up with different eras of history. And this is the first time that we've had it in an air sign. And if I don't know the timetable exactly, but it's been a few hundred years, I think, besides the 1980s, which I will talk about. And Saturn and Jupiter, they both represent lawmakers and teachers. So with Saturn and Jupiter coming together in Aquarius, I think there will be new laws implemented for the collective, because Aquarius represents groups of people and yeah, just society and stuff like that. Large groups of people, like the common people, the average person. And so Saturn, when it comes to Saturn, it tells you what you cannot do, and it basically tells you things that are wrong. You know, what's wrong with society? What's wrong with the way people are? And so it just represents where your limits and boundaries are. And he's a lesson giver as well. A lesson giver in the sense of negativity, discouraging lessons, and being strict and harsh rules, regulations, protocols for the people. And Jupiter is more of a positive energy. It tells you what you can do. It's more of a yes planet. Saturn is more of a no planet. And Jupiter represents the law in the sense of what is right, morals, ethics, and a lesson giver in the sense of positivity and to encourage people. And it's more of a gentle, pleasant planet. And the dynamic between these two, because Saturn is in its own sign, Jupiter is going to expand the qualities of Saturn more. So it's kind of like putting Saturn on steroids, kind of like what we've been through this whole year, because Jupiter is debilitated now. So we're feeling more Saturn stuff,
Mm-hmm.
while Saturn is more of a reduction energy, so it suppresses the quality of Jupiter,
Mm-hmm.
like putting limits on opportunities to travel to different places of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So setting boundaries and limits in that respect, and just amplifying Saturn qualities like fear, anxiety, skepticism, distrust, doubt, and sometimes the dark side of Saturn Jupiter conjunctions that sometimes it can create racial tension, or sometimes it could bring about ignorance, because Saturn is more lack and Jupiter is culture in different ethnic backgrounds of people. So there's oppositional tension sometimes with those two planets. But the good side about Saturn Jupiter is that sometimes a person could be uh, spiritually practiced with their religion or their faith or whatever, and they could be really educated on historical subjects.
Mm. So kind of this tendency from 2020 does not change. It's actually because
Yeah,
Saturn
yeah.
were in
I,
Capricorn the whole 2020. They were not exactly conjunct, but they were very close to each other. So Jupiter's quality
mm-hmm,
would suppress freedom, easy movement, travel. Saturn's quality
mm-hmm.
amplified, like you said, fear, restrictions, orders. And now we move again to Saturn sign, where Jupiter is a bit better, though, thankfully. but
Yeah,
but still, this trend carries on.
yeah. The good thing about us Jupiter being in Aquarius is that it's not debilitated, so it has a little bit more of a positive influence.
Mhm.
And plus, Pluto was in the mix of that, so Pluto can be cathartic and purging energy and death and stuff like that. So at least we'll be away from that kind of energy, or sometimes paranoia,
Yeah,
or just
paranoia,
yeah,
definitely.
paranoia, suspiciousness, and uh, overly accusatory of certain things, overly suspicious,
Mhm.
and just extreme with the distrust. So Saturn and Pluto, they have that in common with distrust and suspiciousness. Well, Saturn is more skepticism. It doesn't like nonsensical information.
Mhm. Mhm. And Pluto in
So
the mix,
that's
like all the conspiracy theories, all the
yeah,
Pluto, Jupiter is like extreme beliefs, people fighting for those extreme beliefs. Now,
yeah, and
believe,
Jupiter is beliefs.
yeah.
And with Jupiter debilitated, it's extreme with the doubt. And then all Jupiter can do is just amplify the qualities of Pluto and Saturn. That's all it can do. Just make those two planets bigger. And Saturn represents decay and coldness, dryness.
Mhm.
And Saturn is just, it's in its own sign, so it's a lot more stronger. So it's stifling Jupiter. You know, that's all it can do.
But at least
So
2020, we're moving from that very uh, dreadful plutonic energy. It felt like the end, a lot of people felt like it's Armageddon, the end of the world type of.
yeah, yeah.
So at least those heavy feelings were moving beyond.
Mm-hmm. Right. And also, um, there will be Uranus square to Saturn,
Hmm.
and then it'll be Mars square to Saturn. And we had a long transit of that when it was in there. Well, it's still in Aries, but what I think will happen with these square aspects is that, well, the FDA just approved for the vaccines, and Mars rules sharp objects like needles, knives, anything that cuts you or penetrates you. And the symbol of Mars is a phallic symbol. It's a sharp point symbol.
Hmm.
And Uranus represents anything that is modern and new.
Hmm.
And so with a square aspect, there will be a lot of tension and resistance. And Saturn is fear and anxiety, and Jupiter is just blowing that up, you know, extreme fear. And Saturn is in Aquarius, so the common people are scared of anything modern and new. And it's a sharp object, and that's supposed to heal us from this virus.
Hmm.
So it's not going to be this year. I would say is a year of transition. I don't want to define it as something bad or good, but a year of transition
Hmm.
where new things can come about. We have to get used to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it won't be so much death this year, especially in the spring and summertime when Jupiter will take a few steps in Pisces. I feel like that will be a sense of relief when
Mm-hmm.
it's out of Saturn signs. And also, I wanted to talk about aspects because there's different um, there's different concepts on how to interpret aspects. Like you have Tajika aspects, which is the same as Western aspects, the major ones, which is trines, conjunctions, sextiles, and squares, and in oppositions. And then there's Vedic aspects. So the way it's done, all the planets are calculated by percentages. So all of the planets give 100% aspect in the opposite sign from itself. And but the planets that are past the Earth, that are beyond the Earth, they have more vision. Aspects are about vision on what the planets can see. So Mars has more of a vision than Venus and Mercury and the Moon and the Sun. So it has more vision. So it aspects 100% seventh from itself, eighth from itself, and fourth from itself.
For Mars.
So yeah, so I do. So even though this is a square aspect, it's a 270-degree aspect. It gives 100% aspect to 90 degrees. So I do feel like maybe this Mars aspect won't be so intense,
Okay.
and it'll be a quicker transit. It's not retrograde like it has been for the last few months. And then, so yeah, that's kind of what I think about that. And I also kind of wanted to talk about Saturn and Uranus too, because well, let me go over um, the history of Saturn and Jupiter, if that's okay. Should I go with
Saturn
that?
and Jupiter or Saturn and Uranus?
Um, Maybe Saturn and Jupiter. Let's talk
Oh.
about Saturn and Jupiter. So the last time Saturn was in Aquarius was barely a few months ago. So what happened was we had uh, when the whole pandemic, blew up at around late March. Um, One of the things that everybody kept saying was social distancing.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like another thing. And then when it made a square aspect to Uranus, Uranus represents technology. And then there was a conspiracy theory about 5G. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, I was into it. I'm still into it. I believe everything that is not on the mainstream media. That's not healthy. Let me tell you.
Right. So I'm thinking like Uranus and Taurus, like technology implemented into the earth, and Saturn squaring it is fear of something like that. And Saturn likes to point out what's wrong. Like, hey, what is that? You shouldn't be doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like that distrust with unusual, weird stuff. Technology in plants and trees. I didn't keep up with this, so I don't know too much about it, but I just remember that was the talk for that amount of time.
Yes.
Yeah, then we had the George Floyd situation, the George Floyd murder, and then there was the outrage with that. Now, Saturn in Aquarius doesn't necessarily cause a murder, but it does. What I noticed with Saturn in Aquarius is it does give power to the people, because Saturn is in its own sign, so the dignity of the planet is really strong. But it's not centralized power like the sun. It's the opposite of Leo. So it's not centralized power. It's more, it's a little bit more abstract, giving power to the common people of society and bringing people together. So it's organizations of groups, a certain type of group of people. So we had the protesting after the murder of George Floyd and the murder of Breonna Taylor. And then 30 years before that, in 1991, there was the Rodney King situation. Exactly. And then there was a protest after that. Now, as far as the beatings and murders go, that's more of a Mars aspect thing. So each Saturn Aquarius was a different situation. The Saturn Aquarius in general just basically brings people together. And that's basically
social activism, social rising of the common people.
Yeah, right. So the Saturn Aquarius, I think, would be overall a good thing. It just may have a rough beginning because of the tension, the contentious energy between Uranus and Saturn. And so I kind of want
3 times. The Saturn-Uranus square happens 3 times in February, in June and in December, I think. So the whole year is under the influence of Saturn square Uranus. It's constant.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me see. I don't know if I should go over some historic, because I have a list in front of me. Should I
Yes,
go over?
I'm very interested in the historical. I'm sure people are, because you can put in perspective. That's how astrology works.
Mm-hmm.
We're not psychics. We look what happened
Right.
before in history and we're like, okay, how can it be translated in our modern age?
Right. Right. So one thing I noticed about Saturn and Uranus, to me, this is the most interesting. Um, it's the most interesting and yet the most difficult because they're so different. You know, Uranus is new and modern and individualistic, independent, very similar to Mars if you think about it. They both like freedom and space. So Uranus and Mars, they work kind of well together. They're both erratic. Uranus is a little bit more unpredictable in comparison to Mars, and Saturn is consistent, diligence, um, you know, hard work, and it's more of a slower energy. But what I've noticed, based on the history I've looked at between these two, is that Saturn likes to compartmentalize things and box things in. So whenever Uranus and Saturn come together, it becomes what I like to call the new normal. That's what I call it. It becomes a new normal because Saturn is so old school and so traditional, and Uranus is the opposite of that. So I'm a one of the things that I came across is I can go on forever with this, but one of the
Please do.
interesting
Please do.
yeah,
I
one
want
of
to
the
hear
interesting
everything.
things was like in the 1890s, Saturn and Uranus they made a conjunction in Scorpio, and during that time there were physicians that were utilizing sex toys to treat um, illnesses for women. They were treating women for hysteria with these sex toys, and they were giving women. And women were standing in long, long lines, and that's another Saturn thing. Like it brings a group of people together for a specific thing. And Scorpio rules the genital area, so women were standing in long lines to have their private areas be stimulated to be treated for hysteria.
Some good old sex treatment with some new technology.
Right, and it became normalized, and that's kind of like what Saturn does. It normalizes something. So yeah, that one was a interesting one to me. Um,
Out of
so
all the Saturn Jupiter interactions, it blows me that you awesome.
right. So then there was other interesting things too. Like let me see. I'm not gonna go over all of it because some of it was kind of boring, but there's another one. Saturn and Jupiter were in Taurus, and it was making a trine aspect to Neptune and Virgo. Now Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, when the three of them make a connection, I noticed it brings something related to cartoons. I noticed because Neptune represents illusions like images and pictures and photography, and Disney was really blowing up in those days, like creating movies like Bambi and Snow White and stuff like that. And Saturn, Jupiter, and Taurus and Uranus all at the same time, trying to Neptune. You know, it's these cartoons are based on nature, like animals and green grass and stuff like that. Like really Taurusy, beautiful type movies,
Yeah.
princess movies and stuff like that. And if you were to fast forward into the late 80s and the early 90s, the Disney blew up again because it was the Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune conjunction. So
Mm-hmm.
like movies, cartoons, and stuff like that. But yeah, but then there was also a period of time where Saturn and Jupiter and Taurus were making a square to Pluto, and that's when there was a World War II.
Great.
So we had World War II, and let me see. Then there was a conjunction in Saturn and Uranus and Gemini, and there was a time clock machine that was developed where people would clock in to go to work.
Mm-hmm.
And Gemini is about minute, minuscule information, like petty little details like numbers, mathematics, Gemini rules,
Scheduling,
mathematics.
planning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so stuff like that. And then television became something new. And again, it's boxing something in. Like it's Uranus is like electricity, so it's boxing something in. So it likes to have some kind of control. Saturn likes to make things useful and practical and make it last forever. And people use television to this day.
And it started during Saturn-Uranus interaction that it got normalized for people to have TVs and
Yeah,
oh,
it became the new normal, as I
yeah.
like to
Yeah.
say.
Oh, wow.
And then there was a Saturn in Libra conjunction to Neptune square to Uranus. Now, this is another thing that I thought was interesting. That's when the whole polio outbreak happened. And what happened? People were very resistant to the vaccines for polio. So it just made me think about the Uranus Saturn square now, resisting to something new.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we are afraid of this new modern thing. Like, what is this? It's unfamiliar. It's uncomfortable. Saturn likes to stick to what it knows.
Mm-hmm.
And also with Uranus and Cancer, Cancer deals with um, motherhood and property and land. It's a patriotic sign. So, and people, when technology in those days, people didn't like the idea of implementing technology in the home because, again, it's a Saturn square. So people were not comfortable with that. They used to think that having a TV in your house was stupid or dumb.
No,
And
it brings
Saturn,
the devil into your house. That's how they
yeah, right. It's distrust. You know, it didn't become nobody became comfortable with that until Saturn got into Scorpio and it made a trine eventually. But when it was a square, you know, it was weird to have a radio in your house or a refrigerator in your house or a telephone in your house. Instead of refrigerators, they had ice boxes.
Mm-hmm.
So to have a refrigerator and a radio and a television, I think they call it a stupid box. Like they said the TV made you stupid or something like that.
I think they are very right.
Yeah. Yeah. It
Not
can make
unless you use it to watch us guys on YouTube, and then it makes you.
right. So then we have then there was Saturn opposition Uranus and Pluto. Again, resistant to anything modern and new. So we had the civil rights movement, the Vietnam War,
So
all in the
Saturn Uranus civil rights movement starts.
yeah.
Okay, and
Sometimes it could be some kind of war going on whenever it's Saturn and Uranus. Sometimes I notice too. Like World War One, there was a Uranus Saturn square. I don't remember the signs, but yeah, I've seen a lot of Saturn Uranus squares during wars sometimes. Hopefully there's no war this year. But another thing that I came across was video games. Anytime Saturn and Uranus and Neptune, all three of them make contact, again, it's usually some kind of cartoon or movie or some kind of video game, like arcade video games. Arcade game machines came about in the early 70s when Saturn was in Gemini, making a trine aspect to Uranus and Libra and creating a sextile aspect to Neptune and Sagittarius. Then it happened, then when fast forward to the 80s again, when Saturn and Uranus made a conjunction with Neptune in the late 80s and early 90s, Sega Genesis and Nintendo and all these video games were starting to become the new normal where you could have it in your house instead of going to an arcade game.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So then, they're like 2D video games because Saturn is more stiff, but once it started to drift away from itself in the early 90s, then video games became a little bit more fluid. They became more 3D.
Mm-hmm.
And Saturn is kind of like it makes it kind of stick like glue. So it makes that effect last long. So Saturn contacts of the outer planets are a big deal. And then in the early 80s, here's a Saturn Jupiter example. We had the AIDS outbreak in the early 80s, 1981. But Pluto was involved.
So it was Saturn,
Saturn,
Pluto, yeah. Well, what we had
yeah,
20.
right. So the AIDS outbreak happened, but then the launch of MTV came about, and so MTV is like music videos was like a new thing, and Libra deals with the arts and relationships, and so yeah, music was really good in those days, like from the early '80s to the '90s. That's like I would say that's everybody's favorite time span of music. Saturn and when Saturn and Jupiter made a conjunction in Libra, and because Saturn is exalted and Jupiter is amplifying the exaltation of Saturn, if that makes sense.
That's I've noticed something, and I think another astrologer had made a big research that music trends tend to change every 20 years. And he
They
found
do.
that it's exactly after Saturn-Jupiter conjunctions because they bring in a new social, economic, and social consciousness, and that changes also the music styles. And
It does.
usually the first 10 years, there is like huge, you know, new, like I think in the 80s was like the new romantics, like all those new
The new
styles that
romantic.
we
Yeah.
never heard of came. And then in the next 10 years, it kind of starts to degenerate a bit and it gets to more,
Yeah.
it went to the grunge stuff. I love grunge, but and the last one was Saturn Jupiter conjunction in Taurus, and that's when the whole pop shit came out.
Yeah.
Like all
Yeah.
the Britneys and the Christina Aguileras, and that's the end of that age now. So I'm so
Yeah.
excited to see what kind of new music will come out now.
I wonder too. And just I wanted to talk about more about this music thing because there was Pluto in the mix too. So sometimes music can lean towards the dark side. And there was a movie that came out in that year, An American Werewolf in London, and Michael Jackson got inspired by that movie. And a year later, he contacted the director, and that's when the music video Thriller came out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that was another thing that I noticed. So it's like you got your good music, and then sometimes it would lean towards the dark side sometimes. And then Saturn and Jupiter will be in Libra again in the 40s. So hopefully it'll be great music again, you know. We'll be old, but you know, hopefully there'll be like better music at that time.
Revival of the 80s style again.
Yeah. Yeah, so those are the kind of things that I came across. So yeah, that's pretty
Very
much. Oh yeah,
think
and
that's
also,
that's lighter because a lot of astrologers, and I've been every Saturn Uranus square that I checked in opposition, it was a recession. The last one was
yeah,
2008, Saturn opposition Uranus, 2008, the big recession. The previous one was the year 2000, the dot-com bubble and recession. The one before that,
yeah,
it's crazy. And the 1929 Saturn square Uranus
uh
was
huh,
the Great Depression in the States.
right,
Then there was one square or something in the 70s. That was the hyperinflation in the States. And I'm like, okay, that's one big thing.
yeah.
It's gonna be a financial. Of course, we see it already, but I think it will be quite big.
Yeah, that's the only thing that worries me about the financial crisis and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Especially with Uranus being in Taurus, wealth-oriented sign. So that's the only thing that makes me worry a little bit. So, but overall, I don't think this is a terrible year.
Okay.
Not like this year.
No, not like 2020.
Yeah,
No.
not like 2020.
Yeah. There'll
But
be the
yeah,
fight between the new things that are coming and people just trying to stick to the old, and it's going to
uh-huh,
create a lot of resistance and, like you said, a lot of social unrest, the social coming together. Let's say not unrest, coming together for common ideas. Uh,
uh-huh.
but it's yeah, I think it's
Okay.
definitely less of a shock, less of a. The 2020 was not only a shock; it was. It feels like like we all had a chain around our neck.
Yeah.
A choker, not a shocker. It was a choker. 2021, there is this element of excitability because of Uranus. There is this element of
Yeah.
newness. It's not stuck, and like 2020, there is like no option. We're stuck. This Capricorn energy, there's no, just like so constipated. in Aquarius,
Yeah.
and with the energy of Uranus, everything will start moving so much faster, and there'll be this new solutions that are popping up, new developments. It's like people won't have time to catch their breath, I even think, with the new.
Yeah. And by it being away from Pluto, it won't be so dark.
Exactly.
That's so I feel like it's a little bit lighter,
All,
especially in an air sign. It'll be a lot lighter.
and Uranus energy is exciting. It's not this,
Yeah,
oh my
it's
God, we're
liberating.
all gonna die. Cabal is gonna make us all into slaves, and it's
Right.
like, okay, there's new opportunities. Let's see what, it's gonna be shaky, but it's
Mm-hmm.
exciting. That's the shift that I see. Very
Mm-hmm.
unpredictable, but very
Mm-hmm.
exciting.
Cool. Can I share my screen, and do you want to go through the transits of the whole year?
Whatever you want to do.
Okay. Give me 1 second. You turn this off. Sorry, my computer is slow.
It's okay.
Okay, do you see a screen in front of you?
Yes, it says you have started screen sharing, but I just.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay, yeah.
All right, so this is the chart of today, but let's fast forward to 2021. So let me move this out the way. So yeah, let's fast forward to January 1st. Make it go faster. All right, so is this okay? Yeah, I think this is okay. Okay, so you can kind of see that Saturn and Jupiter are making a square to Uranus, and then you'll see that Mars is getting close to it. So it'll be squaring Mercury. So this is like with Mercury involved, I think this will be a time to be careful of what you say because with Mars aspecting Mercury along with Saturn and Jupiter, sometimes people can make very ignorant, blunt, insensitive comments with Jupiter and Saturn in the mix. Could be related to race and culture. So
Um,
you don't want to be too brash or crass or anything like that
I think
around
that
that time because it's
period.
gonna.
Sorry, here.
Oh, were you about to say something? It's okay.
Because everything is squaring in Aquarius and the Taurus, and both Aquarius and Taurus are connected to financial energies. I think January is when if there is like a crash financial, it can show up then because
Mm-hmm.
it's tension, or things
Yeah, some
hardening.
kind of right, and I think people will be like dishing out information.
Mhm.
That may be a bit kind of rude or blunt or too direct. And then with Venus in the mix, I think there will be things going on related to relationships that are a bit too conservative.
Mhm.
And then and I think with Uranus square, it could be a theme of like rebelling against tradition related to race, culture. I've seen something like that when there was like around 1988, there was a unusual opposition with it was a Saturn Uranus conjunction opposition to Venus, and they were retrograding for a long period of time for the majority of that whole year. And I noticed when I was looking up what was going on around that year, there were being laws implemented related to relationships. Like you couldn't display affection in relation. I think it was in a European country. I don't remember exactly. I think it was the United Kingdom. And it was also you could not display relationships, homosexual relationships. And Uranus is about doing something that is unusual or untraditional, and Saturn is the opposite of that.
Mhm.
And it was in Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is law or religion and stuff like that. And when it was in Capricorn, because it was at the late degrees of Sagittarius and the early degrees of Capricorn, that's more of a traditional home career dynamic with Cancer and Capricorn, and the divorce rates were extremely high at
Mm.
that time.
So it was,
Because Uranus is very disruptive,
yeah.
and Saturn is a planet of tradition. So marriages that have been that have lasted for like 20 plus years were broken
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
Saturn tends to break things. So that's one of the negative qualities of Saturn-Uranus dynamics. Is it breaks Saturn's concrete walls sometimes. It's like putting a crack into something made out of stone, like something that's been there forever, and then you break it.
But that it can be quite good as well, because sometimes you're just petrified in some situation that you're slowly dying in. So I think Saturn,
Yeah,
yes, it's shaky, yes, it's scary, but it will really kick us out of our own prisons, let's say.
yeah. In a way, it could be a good thing because with Saturn, it implements rules and protocols and stuff like that. So um, we've been experiencing this for the past year anyway, especially when Saturn went into Aquarius around the spring and early summer 2020. And people were rebelling against some of these rules, you know, like putting arrows on the floor and stuff like that, glass guards everywhere, being anti-mask and stuff like that. So it creates an anti-energy. Here are these rules and regulations, and people are rejecting it. That's a Uranus energy,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
you know, that teenagery vibe that, you know, this is stupid. I don't want to do this. These rules are petty and dumb because they're rules for the collective. It's in Aquarius. It's for the collective groups of people. And Uranus is like, no, this is dumb. I don't want to do this.
That's
So it's a lot of
exactly
push.
what I was thinking in 2021. Humanity
Mm-hmm.
becomes a teenager. I was saying that.
Yeah, I saw that. That's what made me think of it. I'm like, that's a perfect description because that's exactly what it is. Like, and Saturn is like a parental figure. You have to do this and you have to do that. And the teenager energy is like, why? This is dumb. You know? So
I know better. You old dinosaur.
yeah, it's like this is so dumb and old school and just it's too much. And then Jupiter just makes it bigger, you know, so it's just overkill with the Saturn stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
So people are just kind of resisting, especially with Mars. It'll be like angry rebellion. It's more than just purposeful rebellion. It's angry with Mars here.
So it seems like January and February are very a months where social unrest with more dangerous proportions can happen.
Yeah, and Mercury in the mix. He's just the messenger. He's just telling what the rule because it's in the midst of Venus and Jupiter and Saturn. So Mercury is just telling everyone what the rules and regulations are. And with Mars aspecting it, people could be like, well, that's dumb. That's stupid. We shouldn't have to do that. I don't want to take the vaccine. You know, it's just resistant, you know, to follow these protocols and stuff like that. So a little rough beginning.
Jeez, how
You know?
much Aquarius energy the first 2 months. Crazy. It's
Yeah, so it'll finally alleviate itself when Mars makes a trine. Mars will finally start getting along with Jupiter and Saturn, for God's sake.
from March. So from March.
Yes, for Mars, and then around um, let's see, May, I believe Jupiter will finally be into Pisces. It's like I think that'll give us like you can. I think the racial stuff will like loosen up a bit, like more acceptance and love and compassion and understanding and stuff like that. So,
Exactly. Yeah, there is the Piscean energy. It's
uh-huh.
will be more. Yeah.
So I also wanted to show you charts of eclipses.
Oh.
So I want to show, let me see. I wanted to show the eclipse of 2019. So I'm taking a step backwards, if you don't mind. So we had the eclipse. What makes this eclipse so bad is that it really set the tone of what 2020 was going to be like, and it's over a debilitated Jupiter,
Mhm.
and sometimes the nodes represent abnormalities, and K2 does represent viruses,
Mm.
and Rahu can represent strange, unusual things from outside environment that
It's
could
almost like
potentially,
poisons, yeah, Rahu.
yeah, like poisons, outside stuff, and the south node is more internal, and it's at the lowest declination in Capricorn, the southern solstice, which can imply death. And then the dispositor, which is Saturn, is at 20 degrees. So uh, Chris Brennan did a video where he was showing graphs how every single time Jupiter and Pluto made a conjunction around these degrees, it was a spike in death when it came to the coronavirus. Whenever Jupiter and Pluto were coming around these degrees, every single time.
Mhm.
So I wanted to bring this up because, let me see, let me close this out, because around December of 2021,
That's 2020, I think.
oh, it's 2020. Okay, yeah, I gotta change it. All right, so now we're in, let's see, yeah, there will be a Venus retrograde around this time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's a benefic. So I'm hoping that it'll be something good. It doesn't have any harsh aspects. So something is happening here. And then even after this Venus retrograde is done, Mercury will start to retrograde over those same degrees.
Mm.
So I don't know, it could be um, a resurgence of the COVID cases. I hope not,
Mhm.
but there is definitely something going on. By Venus being benefic, it could be something healing if there are COVID cases.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's just my take on that.
Mm.
And also, I wanted to compare the stellium and Aquarius that we're having this year to the Black Plague.
Ah, awesome.
So
Are they gonna
this,
release a more deadly COVID? Like in the conspiracy
well, I
theories,
don't
I
think
think they're preparing a deadlier version for us. No.
so. Well, the reason why this one was bad is because, you could see why that eclipse was so bad in 2019. This eclipse was like the beginning of the Black Plague. And so you always check the dispositor. This one is, whenever solar eclipses are in different signs, it's always kind of tricky, but you always want to look at the dispositor of both planets. So the south node is in Aries, and Aries is in Aquarius, along with Jupiter and Saturn. And then the dispositor for the sun and the moon, which is in Pisces, is Jupiter. It's with a malefic planet. So malefics involved with the eclipses are usually an indication of something bad or death or pandemics. Especially with Jupiter involved, it spreads like wildfire. And this lasted for a long time. Again, Saturn is a solidifying energy, and Mars is a malefic planet.
Isn't that when half the population of Europe died?
Yeah, like over like 200 million people or something like that.
And I remember because they asked the astrologers of those times what caused this plague, and they said the conjunction of Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars in Aquarius is what
In
triggered.
Aquarius.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
So I'm not.
can I say one good thing after this plague? What was
Yeah.
the social structure of the whole of Europe changed because till then everyone was a serf. Basically, you are someone's possession of the lord there, and you work their land. The serfdom,
Hmm.
or being the serfdom and the ownership of the lords after the people broke. So it ended. So I know it killed half the population, but because there were no more
Yeah.
people to work the lands and stuff, they had to give them freedom. So despite of this
Hmm.
whole distraction that it caused, this Aquarius, Saturn, what we're gonna have now, Saturn conjunct Jupiter in Aquarius, but it was with Uranus, with Mars as well, which is even more intense. It brought something devastating,
Hmm.
but it was actually the liberation of the peasants in Europe and the more freedom.
Yeah.
So yeah, But interesting.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
I didn't know some of that stuff. But yeah, but this conjunction is different because Mars is like right here, putting its stamp on it. And that's why it lasted longer. I think the coronavirus, it'll end quicker
Yeah.
than this because this lasted for quite a few years.
Oh, it's
So
nowhere
whenever,
deadly as well, the corona. This thing would kill every second person. That's scary.
yeah, that was scary. And what I read about the Black Plague was that people were making accusations and blaming the Jews. And again, this
Right.
is the darker side of what Saturn and Jupiter can do when they're together. Especially with Mars here, it can sometimes bring about culture or religious tension and ignorance,
Mhm.
and pointing the finger. Saturn likes to point the finger and blame and
Mhm.
criticize when it wasn't the Jews at all. It was the disease was coming from fleas from rats.
Yeah. Wow.
And then the same thing happened with influenza. They thought it was Spain, but it wasn't Spain. It was coming from birds.
Mm.
So they call it the Spanish flu. I call it influenza because it didn't come from Spain, but they call it the Spanish flu. And people were making racist comments about China due to the coronavirus.
Mhm.
So this with Saturn and Jupiter, you especially when they're in bad dignity, especially Jupiter with a malefic, it can bring on those topics
Mhm.
where people will say something insulting or insensitive about a particular culture, a particular race.
Mhm.
Stuff like that happens. But the eclipses this year, I think, will be a little bit better. You want me to go over the eclipses
Oh yeah, quick. Yeah.
and then we'll wrap it up? Okay. So the first one, I think it's this one. Yeah, this is the first one. So we have a lunar eclipse and the dispositor. So the dispositor for the North Node is Mercury. Mercury's in its own sign. So I think this is going to be one of the good eclipses. And
Mhm.
Mercury's about communication, learning, business. So I think people will I think they'll start to open up businesses again.
May towards the end of
May,
21.
yeah,
Oh yeah,
yeah,
good for the small owner, local business type of thing.
yes.
Gemini.
So I think local businesses will open again because Rahu is about pushing forward, and the South Node is more about um, wrapping things up and finishing and completing, and then going towards more Rahu stuff.
Shit, so we're locked up
And
till
and it's with
May.
Venus.
So we'll be
Yeah. Right.
they just said
And
till
then to have
Christmas.
Venus
No.
and to have it with Venus is nice too. So it's like pleasant, nice, and then Saturn. The only thing that worries me a little bit is the Neptune square, which can muddle things up, water things down, or create confusion, like maybe confusion or misunderstandings with documents, papers, or making things official. But with Saturn trine, I do think it'll clean things up a bit because
Mhm.
it's a trine. It's almost kind of like making mistakes, but then you go back and like clean it up. And Mercury will retrograde too, so I do think it'll be something where you have to backtrack on something.
Mhm. Well, but I do like all this Gemini energy. It's also traveling. Gemini,
Yeah,
it's
local traveling mostly. Yeah,
yeah. So I think if you want to travel, that might be the good time in the spring as well. And Jupiter is in its own sign in Pisces, so it will allow
yeah, and it's
more
even making a out of sign trine.
yeah. So
So we got a supportive trine from Jupiter, Saturn. So with the retrograde and Neptune, it's like tying loose ends. Like, okay, this is nice, but we got to fix, tie loose ends here, cross our, dot our I's and cross all of our T's, like that kind of nature.
yeah.
So then, let's see, the next one. Yeah, this is like solar eclipse. So it's basically the same thing. They're roughly around the same degrees, except Mercury's in retrograde. So it's basically the same kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
Very
for 2
mercurial
months we're doing
energy
that.
here.
Yeah.
Huh?
For 2 months we're kind of focused on those things almost. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. totally different from last year in May and June. That was rough.
That it's
And then,
also calling this eclipse on the 20th degree, which is one the star Capella is not far there, which is money star. So it might be a good sign that you know.
yeah, it is a money star. And so the other eclipse of Venus was there under the nakshatra of Mrgashira, which is like really sweet and gentle. So it'll be like really nice energy there. So that'll be a pleasant time. And then the next one, this is the only one this one is confusing. So you got a lunar eclipse, at least the moon is exalted, that's good. And again, it's Venus. And we talked about how Venus going over those same degrees around the late 20s. So this is saying something. And then the North Node being in Gemini. So we got to think about what Mercury's doing. Mercury is with Mars. And then the South Node being in Sagittarius. So then we look at Jupiter, and Jupiter is squaring Mercury and Mars. So that's the only thing that worries me a little bit. Like, I don't know if it could be what's the word I'm looking for? Like inflammation. And it's around fall and winter time. So I don't know if it would be a resurge of COVID cases again. But then I think with Venus retrograding, it could also be a time of getting our hands on it in a time of healing. Like almost kind of like catching.
I'm worried again about the financial situation. Lunar eclipse in Taurus square Jupiter.
Yeah, so I don't, yeah. It could be definitely something financial too.
It's close to the Pleiades as well. These are the seven sisters, prime seven sisters. It is a cult energy, but yeah.
Yeah, and then the last one, yeah, it's all in Sagittarius. So this is all Jupiter. It would be so much better if Jupiter had made it to Pisces, but it's not. It's still in a Saturn sign. But again, at least it's with Mercury, so I don't know. It could be something again business related, or it could be something related to travel again. So yeah,
maybe relaunching traveling.
yeah, relaunching things related to education, educating ourselves about humanitarian purposes. So with Jupiter being in Aquarius. But yeah, and this is the last eclipse of the year. At least it's 4 and not 6 like this year.
Yes.
Yeah, this year eclipses was so rough, especially for me. I don't know about you, but it was terrible on me.
Oh my God, on the whole world.
The whole world.
But it's
So, yeah.
and look at after 2021, Jupiter enters its own sign. Jupiter's travel South Node, which weakens the sign the whole year and a half till the end of 2021, and from the middle of 2020 has been in Sagittarius, the sign of air travel, foreign travel. So these were very weakened. And the moment,
Very
the end of
weakened.
2021, the South Node leaves that sign, so international travel opens up again, like much.
Right, because the nodes will shift out of Gemini and Sagittarius. So with the nodes shifting into Scorpio and Taurus, and Jupiter going to Pisces, and then eventually Aries, it'll be a lot easier to explore the world and travel and experience things related to culture and education, because the education has been an issue too, with kids having to stay at home and take online classes and not having the experience of being on campus and stuff like that. My niece is in college now, and she only spent a few months on college campus. Now she had to go right back home.
No parties.
No parties, no dorm rooms, none of that stuff. So, and it sucks because she's a really smart kid and got accepted to the school. So it's, in a way, it's a shame. It's a shame. I can't wait for this stuff to be over. So if I had to describe this whole year, it's a year of adjustment, transitioning, and then 2022 it'll be completely different in a
Different.
good way. It will be better.
Awesome. Yay.
So it's not rough or cruel. Yes, yes, it's so much better than last year. So it'll it's gonna take time. It's like one step ahead than where we were before. So it's step by step for the future.
And as you said, the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction was starting a new 20-year, actually a new 200-year cycle in air signs. So a lot of
In
new
air sign.
things are coming to us, guys. A lot of new solutions,
Yeah,
new ideas, new, of course, technology. It's Aquarius. No way.
yeah.
Like, let's hope we can use it for the humanity's good.
I think Saturn and Jupiter in air signs will be great because Saturn it does well in air signs, and we got a taste of it in the '80s. In the '80s and '90s were great. I love the '80s and '90s.
I know that, me too. I think these are amazing, amazing 2 decades. So we had Saturn
Yeah,
and Libra. So bring it on.
yeah, yeah. And not to brag, but some of the best astrologers were born at that time.
So it's
I mean,
air
think about
sign.
it.
Oh,
Yeah,
imagine
it
what
make
kind of astrologers will be born now with Saturn, Jupiter,
yeah,
Aquarius. Come on, Darren,
exactly.
baby time. Baby sign.
Yeah, yeah, I'm excited, and it makes sense too because Saturn and Jupiter, they get educated on historical subjects, ancient subjects, and astrology is a very old subject. And around that same time, Pluto was in Scorpio, Uranus was in Scorpio, so and again, Scorpio is about taboo and secrets and stuff like that. So some of the best astrologers were born around that time.
Well, there's a new
Yeah.
opening. New opening.
Yeah.
Thank you so
So,
much,
yep.
Aaron. I really enjoyed that. I loved your fresh perspective. You brought up some things that I never thought about,
Uh-huh.
and it feels lighter. I'm thankful that you this, because I got very much on the other side. I see that, I went very much into the dark side of 2020. I had Pluto square my Sun, my Venus, my
Yeah.
own Pluto. So I really got into, I've always been into conspiracy theories because I have it by opposition, but like I went so deep down the rabbit hole, and I was going mental from time to time. And I saw you giving me
Mhm.
a bit of a lighter perspective, and it's more positive.
Yeah.
Like if I really want to get out of that dark spot, I
Yeah.
find it hard to.
2021, I see the light.
Honestly, I was like, this is biblical stuff. It's like they're gonna chip us. They're gonna. I still think it can happen, but
It can. It can.
we have to run to
Yeah.
the mountains. We have to grow our own food. I was like, the mark of the beast. I went all out.
Yeah.
But I have hope with the Aquarius energy now that people can start forming societies and like-minded communities. If they don't want to be so
Yeah.
part of in the big cities and so dependent on the system. So I think this will give us such a great opportunity now to actually uh, be able to create such communities finally, because they tried with the hippies, it didn't work out. It's
Hmm.
not the right time, but now everything will support it. The universe will support it if people decide to do that, and people want to be a bit more disconnected from the system, let's say. And I want to be so. And my hope is for that. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Darren. I really loved your perspective. If you'd like to have a reading with Darren, Darren is back on the website. His readings, he has amazing readings. You can check out his services, maybe a reading for 2021. I think he has a capacity, not too many people, because he has a daily job as well. So yeah, I don't know how many, but if there are too many orders, we're gonna cut off the off the pain. But thank you so much, Darren. Any concluding words you'd like to add?
I'm sorry, what? You froze.
Any concluding words you'd like to add?
Yes, it feels good to be back. I'm really excited, and I just can't wait to get back out there again. And I'm also working on some things, and I have some classes that I'm working on, so I can't wait to introduce that to you guys. And I think you guys will really love it because it's amazing information. I can't wait to share it with everybody.
Oh, I'm excited too. Thank you so much, Darren. Thank you for opening the marathon. To all our viewers, we have 12 more amazing astrologers, and each one will be making a short summary of the year 2021 and then diving into each of the 12 signs. Everyone will choose one, is chosen one sign, and we'll discuss one. So the whole week ahead, woohoo! We're gonna have fun. Thank you. Thank
All
you,
right.
Darren. Have a
Bye,
great
Lada.
year ahead. Bye.